Please welcome President and Chief Operating Officer of JetBlue, Joanna Geraghty, in conversation with Skift Senior Travel Tech Editor, Sean O'Neill.
Thank you so much for joining us for Skift Global Forum. I was telling my father this weekend I'm going to be interviewing the president of JetBlue and how excited I was. And he has never flown on JetBlue.
Oh no,
because we're in the Philadelphia area, so you're just starting some routes to Florida from here. But so I asked him, what does he know about JetBlue? And he paused and he said, they're one of the only airlines to have blocked out the middle seats during this crisis, and that really resonated for him. And it's not an obvious decision. For most of the airlines in the world are not blocking out the middle seats right now. And you at JetBlue have had to sort of reevaluate this decision almost on a month-by-month basis. So I'm wondering, could you walk us through how you think about that decision?
Sure. I mean, it's a very complex decision. Blocking a middle seat, particularly when you start seeing demand come back, costs quite a bit. But we've been focused on rebuilding customer confidence in flying again and making sure that customers understand everything we're doing and other airlines, because it's very much an industry effort around safety, but understanding what everybody's doing to try to ensure the cabin is safe and healthy. And while the middle seat block is largely a perception issue based upon the data we're seeing in terms of the cleanliness and the clean air in the aircraft cabin, we do know it's something that customers value. That said, we're getting smarter about how to do it. Right now, when you go on JetBlue.com, we're blocking middle seats through October 15th, and it has every middle seat blocked. Families can't actually book seats together on the seat map. So that's been a challenge for families who want to sit together. No-show rates. You do have customers that show up and then you lose those seats and you can't sell those. And so we're working through what's the load factor on a flight, how many customers show up, and how can we just get smarter about what the caps and the lids are on these flights. And I'll say, another thing that happened last week was a Harvard study came out talking about aircraft safety and talking about the benefits of wearing facial coverings on an aircraft inside with the benefits of the HEPA air filtration system. And, essentially concluding that there's less than a 1% risk of, transmitting COVID on an aircraft. And so as I think about flying compared to other things as states and countries reopen that we all do in our normal life, such as going to a restaurant, going to a grocery store, I do think flying is as safe as any of those things. But we do recognize that there's things we must do to ensure safety and health and also regain customer confidence in flying again.
That's very helpful. And that dovetails with what we heard at the beginning of Skift Global Forum from Pulitzer Prize winner Laura Garrett. She sort of reviewed some of the studies that epidemiologists have done. And on the scale of things, being in the aircraft right now, there's a lot to say that it seems to be a relatively safe experience. I want to move on to the big news of the summer, which is that JetBlue actually announced a route expansion. Most airlines right now are happy just to be restarting their service on their existing route networks. And here you are expanding to 54 new routes. Can you walk us through your thinking about doing that?
Sure. I think in a crisis such as a pandemic, there are certain opportunities that are opened up. And as we look at what JetBlue does best, which is leisure travel, 80% of our customers are leisure. We're largely domestic. We saw an opportunity in some of our smaller cities to really add some additional flying in there for our leisure customer base. And then Newark has been a tremendous success for JetBlue. And we saw an opportunity to grow Newark, add transcon flying with our Mint product out of Newark. And so you'll see JetBlue do a number of different things throughout this pandemic as we look for unique opportunities, as we trial and test certain things, but also as we're looking for where demand is. I think the benefit of being a smaller airline is that we are incredibly nimble. We add capacity and take capacity down as demand dictates. And we also have, the cooperation of our entire operations team, because it can be quite disruptive to our operations team when you add new flying in at the last minute. But looking at those opportunities to add flying closer in where demand is and where customers are indicating to us that they want to travel.
Yeah, so you mentioned adding the Newark to California routes with the Mint-equipped aircraft. Those are the A321s. That caught the eye of my colleagues at Airline Weekly. They kind of see it as almost like a strike at the heart of United there. Could you elaborate a bit on your thinking on that route?
JetBlue has been, New York's hometown airline since inception. We have a great franchise out at JFK and LaGuardia. And Newark, we've been looking to grow for the past few years. And as the slot restrictions were lifted at Newark, we saw an opportunity to continue to grow there. You have the new Terminal 1 opening up shortly. So the JetBlue franchise works extremely well in Newark. If you look at the customer demographic, it pulls customers from New Jersey, which, we are very excited to tap into. And it's also about bringing low fares to Newark and really doing what JetBlue does best, increasing the product and the service across the industry in those airports, and also doing it at fares that customers can afford.
Okay, thank you, Joanna. We're going to do an audience poll here to get a feedback. You were just mentioned New York's hometown airport. JetBlue heavily invested in New York, but is New York over? In the sense that it's had a really hard time with this pandemic. If attendees here at Skift Global Forum, we can vote. Do you think your view about New York coming back and its effect? And while those poll results are coming in, not everyone is a fan of the route expansion, Joanna. Brett Snyder of the Cranky Flyer blog last week, he had a post sort of saying, okay, JetBlue, you can expand in the East Coast. You've got the playbook there. You can just go with it. Caribbean, he got it. But in LAX, he thought you're going to really run into some headwinds, real competitive pressures. It's going to be a money loser. What gives you the confidence that LAX is the right move?
We've been operating out of LAX for quite some time now. We commenced mint into LA several years back, and it's outperformed the rest of the network. And so as we think about moving from Long Beach to LAX, we are very confident that in the long term, LAX will perform very well. The average fare is 30% higher out of LAX than it is out of Long Beach. And we're very optimistic that our product and our service will continue to do as well as it's done with these newly added routes. That said, in terms of the full scale up, we're still several years away at LAX from that. We're very mindful of the impact COVID has had to this industry. And we're being cautious about where we add capacity and how quickly we add it back in and how quickly we introduce new flying.
Okay, that makes sense. Attendees will be able to see sort of the poll results coming up shortly. Joanna, coming up with American Airlines about your strategic agreement you signed earlier this summer. It's hard for me to imagine you could have gotten much more out of this agreement for JetBlue. It seems savvily negotiated. Tell our attendees what it is that this deal brings for JetBlue.
Sure. This deal brings, I think, a lot more routes for both American customers and JetBlue customers at reduced fares. It increases competition in the Northeast against some of the very large carriers that are based in the New York and the Boston area. We're extremely excited about what it's going to bring to customers. We're going through the DOJ and the DOT process right now. We'll see how that all shakes out, but we're very optimistic about that partnership. We actually partnered with American back before 2014. And so we have a relationship there. It worked very well there. This is obviously an enhanced partnership, and we're excited about what it's going to bring.
So no domestic code share program has really worked in the U.S. Historically. What is it that you feel this time around is sort of the circumstances are going to be in its favor?
Yeah, I think JetBlue and American complement one another well. I think our networks complement one another well. And I think given, the pandemic, this is going to enable both carriers, hopefully, to emerge that much more quickly. As you think about JetBlue, because of the American deal, we'll be able to operate more flights more quickly as we look at feeding those American customers onto the JetBlue network. Okay,
that makes a lot of sense. And the poll results, people very bullish in New York, which is good to hear. I'm wondering about your announcement in August that you you said that as of August, all of your domestic aircraft are carbon neutral. And you're going to keep with this commitment as the recovery goes on. But, this is a revenue constrained environment right now. Is this the right time to sort of be adding on a cost to be doing carbon neutral?
We believe it's absolutely the right time. Environmental sustainability isn't going away. We need to continue to be good corporate citizens to the environment. And while carbon offsetting is a very good first step, we actually think that there's much bigger plays out there. Sustainable aviation fuel, the market for that is not where it needs to get. JetBlue is operating with sustainable aviation fuel out of our San Francisco airport. We also think, frankly, air traffic control reform and efficient airspace. Right now, there's not a lot of delays, but we can't forget how bad it was prior to the pandemic. And I think efficiently operating in airspace is also an incredibly important part of improving the environmental footprint the aviation industry has.
That makes good sense. I'd like to switch to innovation as a topic. A year ago, I visited the JetBlue headquarters. I was invited as a guest to listen in to an innovation sprint that you were doing. And this is something for a couple of years now. You've taken each department and you've paired them up with people to try to find out what their pain points are. In this case, it was the legal department. And they needed some, sort of help with document management and things, and sort of help them. What are tools that out there in the market, startups and services to help them? And this is part of JetBlue Tech Ventures. What is your verdict on this effort? Has it been good? Is it something you recommend to other companies?
It's been a fantastic opportunity for JetBlue. My team has done a number of innovation sprints. I'm very familiar with the legal innovation sprint and some of the exciting technologies that were identified there. We've actually redeployed it during COVID in, I think, a great way, which is looking at some of these emerging technologies around safety and health as well. So UV technologies, specifically, we've worked with them, antimicrobial technologies. And so, it's been a tremendous asset for my team during this pandemic. As your operators are focused on trying to execute and deliver, a healthy and safe flight, as you're focused on capacity and the right decisions there, having a team that can look at these emerging technologies and not distract your day of operations team from some of that has been a real asset to JetBlue. And I would highly recommend at any company that you explore something like that, because it really does act as, an arm of the company that can focus on technology. And then you can push those new technologies into the company as almost an incubator and kind of try it before you buy it.
I was impressed at how the structuredness of the project, of the process, sort of really encouraged enable everyone. It makes the attempt to try to stay abreast of such things, but you have to be head down so much. I thought I was impressed with what I saw in my reporting there. I have another innovation question. This is more of a tech geek stuff. I cover business to business tech, travel tech for Skift. And I know that Sabre is been a decade-long partner for you for your reservation system. But last year you signed a deal with Sabre in order to help modernize your passenger service system. Are you happy with your relationship with Sabre, and what is it that this new modernization may help your crew members with?
Sure, we are. I mean, we're well underway with the modernization. I think the good news is, unlike what we did back in 2008 with a cutover from Navitaire to Sabre, which was a very large sort of cutover from one company to another, this is a series of meaningful and large updates over the next several years. So it will just update all the technology for our crew members at the gate, for our crew members on booking. There's also a revenue component to it. And so it'll just be a much easier user-friendly interface, and then also allow us to be far more innovative as we think about partnerships with other carriers, as we think about ancillary revenue. It'll allow us to have a more flexible platform and one that can scale better for the company than what we currently are on.
Well, so I'd like to go back in history around the great financial crisis. JetBlue introduced this all-you-can-fly pass, which I think was my favorite thing in aviation in the past decade. We are now in sort of a demand crisis right now. Would you say here today that you 100% rule out ever doing that again because it was just not cost-effective, or is there a chance that JetBlue might bring back the all-you-can-fly pass?
So it was all you can jet.
All you can jet, sorry.
All you can jet. And I was here when we did it, and it was fantastic. I have a jacket that has all you can jet in the back still. I've saved that memento. We would absolutely love to do it again. There are some technology limitations. So I actually think the new Sabre system will help us with being able to do things like that. When we did it the first go round, it was almost entirely manually fulfilled on the back end. And we were much smaller back then. And so given how large we are, although in this environment, we probably could do it fairly easily, but given how large we are in a normal environment, my poor customer service team would be spending a lot of time booking Sean O'Neill's flights for him, and that's not something that's scalable at this time. But we're very potentially excited. We did a test last year. We did a contest with a smaller group for all you can jet last year, but in terms of rolling it out on a widespread basis in a far more meaningful way across certain markets that people want to go to a lot, it's something that requires a fairly meaningful technology lift. But on a small basis, we can still do it, which we did last year.
Okay, very cool, Joanna. We have an audience question. So one thing that was in the news in the past couple of weeks is there's some airlines, if my memory is right, it's in Asia, where they're having flights to nowhere. There's such a demand for people who've missed being in the planes that they're just taking off and then going back and landing. Is that something that JetBlue would ever consider doing?
It's not something we would consider doing. We have great destinations. We still have great destinations. If you're going to get on a plane, you might as well go to one of those great destinations and, support the local economy in those places to recover. I also think there's an environmental component to that I would want to be mindful of as well.
Okay. Let's maybe go back to March and April. What was it like being an executive at JetBlue at that time? If you could paint us a little bit of a picture of sort of the unusual circumstance. We've sort of gone through this whole crisis, and we've kind of lost how unusual that moment was.
Yeah, I mean, unusual, I think, is absolutely the word. I think first and foremost, things just fell off a cliff almost overnight. And it requires the leadership team in our front line to really very quickly adjust. And, we were in New York City. Our headquarters is here, our main support center. We have a large operation here, and that was also where the center of the pandemic was. And so just the fear and concern our crew members had, and making sure that we very quickly put into place protocols around contact tracing, testing, sick policies for COVID on top of the existing sick policies we had, and reassuring crew members that we were doing everything we could based on existing CDC guidance to protect them and keep them healthy and safe. But it's scary because you're a frontline crew member out in the operation working, and there are people that have COVID that don't realize they have it, and you're coming into contact with them. And so safety of our crew members and our customers was our number one priority, and always has been throughout this pandemic. And then obviously you turn to the near overnight collapse of revenue. Revenue was down 95%. And so you're focused entirely on trying to reduce costs. So ceasing any discretionary spending and looking for, how do you cut capacity very quickly, reduce flying ground aircraft. I mean, the amount of aircraft that were grounded nearly overnight, finding parking spots for those, in the short term. And then as the reality of the pandemic settled in and you realize this wasn't going to be a 30 or 60-day event, this was going to be something much longer, how do you then start to build a broader playbook to manage through this new normal? But I was riding my bike to work over the Queensboro
Riding your bike to work.
Read the Queensboro Bridge every day. There was no traffic, there was nobody. I mean, it was just eerie. But I think this industry is an incredibly resilient industry. It's an industry that, people love and is incredibly important to the economy. And so, making sure that it emerges and it emerges strong is critically important. And I think JetBlue, along with so many other carriers, has done so much to, protect the safety, well-being of customers, of crew members, and also really take a number of, financial measures to ensure that we can ride this crisis out.
Okay. And then earlier at Skift Global Forum, Delta CEO Ed Bastian, he sort of made a claim that he really takes diversity and structural equity issues close to heart. What is your view on sort of this topic that's really top of mind right now?
Yeah, I mean, this has always been core to who JetBlue is. As you look at, I'm the most senior woman in the airline industry, and it's been a really important part of our board and our leadership team to make sure that we're advancing crew members of all ethnicities and, gender across JetBlue. That said, we have a lot of work to do. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement has really highlighted so much of, bias that we may not know we have, but also just so much opportunity out there that we, with a concerted effort and with a focus, that we can actually really move the needle in a meaningful way. If you look at JetBlue, 55% of our crew members are ethnically diverse across the company. But that number changes as our leadership ranks, as we go up the leadership ranks. As leaders, 42% of our leaders are diverse. We have work to do. And, you look at our most senior level, you look at our board, we've made some progress, but we are a ways away from it. And, it's not just about placing people of ethnic diversity into a position. It's also about making sure that they feel that they belong and that they're set up for success. And so, we're very much focused on not just having people of color in leadership positions and making sure that there's opportunities out there, but when those opportunities are given, making sure that they're going to succeed in those opportunities, because there's nothing worse than when somebody fails. But there's got to be a structure built around this. We also look at our customer base. I mean, our customer base is incredibly diverse. Does our brand reflect diversity? Are the business partners, the vendors we're doing business with, are they diverse? Are they women, minority-owned businesses? What about the foods we serve on our aircraft? What about the restaurants we have in our terminal? There's so much opportunity here. And we're very much focused on building a plan for JetBlue that speaks to what our crew members have said is most important to them, and what our customers have said is most important to them as well.
Okay. And then about your loyalty program, is there any reason why you might try to securitize the Mint loyalty program the same way that United, Delta have tried to do in order to raise some funds?
We're looking at various opportunities that JetBlue has to continue to raise additional money. The loyalty program is absolutely something that's being considered. And we were pleased to see the Delta transaction go forward several weeks back, and that's something that we'll continue to look at along with other money raising ideas.
I was astonished to see that like half of Delta's net profit was from its loyalty program. It just shows that it might be a tool to help get out of the recovery. Thank you so much, Joanna, for speaking with us and getting us up to date on JetBlue. Really appreciate you being here for Skift Global Forum. And when we come out of this crisis, I'll try to take my dad on a flight from Philly down to Florida.
And I absolutely believe New York is not dead. I saw that whole question there. I live in New York. I'm a New Yorker. New Yorkers are resilient. We will be back. We need a government that focuses on economic recovery, but we will be back.